Enter Charles Houghton, the charming suitor who seems too good to be true, as Libby grapples with her growing feelings for Tom and her father's expectations. Oh, my dears, the plot thickens like honey on a warm biscuit. Chapter 5. Appearances and Realities. The next afternoon found Libby strolling through the town's quaint main street with her childhood friend, Beatrice B. Whittaker. The two young women window-shopped, their arms linked as they caught up on recent events.
Oh, Libby, you should have seen Father's face when I told him about your suffragette luncheon.
Bea giggled, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief.
I thought his moustache might fall off from all the huffing and puffing.
Libby laughed, grateful for her friend's levity after the tense atmosphere at home.
I'm surprised the news hasn't reached every corner of New England by now.
As they passed the local flower shop, Tom emerged, carrying a basket of fresh blooms. His eyes lit up when he saw Libby.
Good afternoon, Miss Elizabeth, Miss Beatrice.
He greeted them, tipping his cap.
Hello, Tom,
Libby replied, her cheeks warming.
Those flowers are lovely.
Tom plucked a delicate white daisy from the basket and offered it to her with a small bow.
Not half as lovely as present company,
he said softly. Libby accepted the flower, her fingers brushing against his.
Thank you,
she murmured, tucking it behind her ear. As Tom continued on his way, Bea nudged Libby with her elbow.
My. If I didn't know better, I'd say our handsome groomsman is sweet on you.
Libby blushed deeper.
Don't be silly, Bea. Tom's just kind.
Bea hummed skeptically.
And I suppose that's why you're blushing like a schoolgirl.
Changing the subject, Libby steered them towards their favourite tea shop. Once seated with steaming cups before them, Bea leaned in conspiratorially.
So, tell me about this Charles Houghton you're meant to meet. I hear he's quite the catch.
Libby sighed.
Father certainly thinks so. He's arranged for us to have dinner together tomorrow night.
Well, I've heard he's terribly handsome,
Bea said.
And smart too, top of his class at law school.
I suppose,
Libby conceded.
But I can't help feeling that Father's trying to distract me from my interests with a shiny suitor.
Bea reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand.
Just promise me you'll give him a fair chance. Who knows? He might surprise you.
The next evening, Libby found herself seated across from Charles Houghton in the Ainsworth's formal dining room. She had to admit Bea was right. Charles was undeniably handsome, with perfectly coiffed dark hair and a winning smile. As the evening progressed, Libby found herself warming to Charles. He was well-spoken, with a sharp wit that matched her own. They discussed literature, philosophy, and even touched on current events.
I must say, Miss Ainsworth, you're unlike any young lady I've met before,
Charles said, his brown eyes twinkling.
Your father mentioned you attended Radcliffe. What did you study there?
Political science and history, Libby replied, bracing herself for the usual dismissive response.
But Charles surprised her.
How fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the current political climate.
As they continued to talk, Libby felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Charles was different from the other stuffy suitors her father usually approved of. Later, as Charles was preparing to leave, they stood in the foyer.
I've had a wonderful evening, Miss Ainsworth,
he said, taking her hand.
I do hope we can continue our discussions soon.
Just then, Tom entered, carrying Charles's coat. As he helped Charles into it, Libby noticed a flash of something. Was it jealousy? Crossed Tom's face. After Charles left, Tom lingered for a moment.
I hope you had a pleasant evening, Miss Elizabeth,
he said, his voice carefully neutral.
It was interesting,
Libby replied, suddenly feeling conflicted.
Charles is not what I expected.
Tom nodded, his jaw tight.
He seems like a fine gentleman,
he said, though Libby detected a hint of strain in his voice. As Tom turned to leave, Libby found herself saying,
The daisy you gave me, it's pressed in my favourite book now.
Tom paused, a slow smile spreading across his face.
I'm glad you liked it, miss,
he said softly, before disappearing down the hall. That night, as Libby prepared for bed, she felt torn. Charles had been charming and seemed to respect her intellect, yet she couldn't shake the warmth she felt when Tom smiled at her. Little did she know that beneath Charles's charming exterior lay beliefs that would horrify her. beliefs about a woman's place in society that he had carefully concealed during their dinner. The true test of character was yet to come,